Assalamualaikum and good morning everyone. I will start our debate. So we are first group as a government. I am NORAINI as the first speaker. The second speaker is MIKAIL. Third speaker NAJMI. Fourth speaker SYAZWANA. Fifth speaker Umi, and the lastly speaker is HUZAIMI. So in today's complex and volatile global landscape, the government's paramount duty is to ensure the security and stability of the state, safeguarding citizens from both internal and external threats. Torture is the intentional infliction of several physical or psychological pain or suffering on an individual, typically to obtain information, coerce a confession, punish, intimidate, or exert control. It often involves methods that cause extreme distress or injury, and is carried out by authorities or individuals in position of power. While the principle that no one shall subjected to torture or to inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment is a fundamental tenet of international human rights law, there are exceptional circumstances where the imperative to protective national security may necessitate extraordinary measures. From the perspective of state sovereignty and integrity, the government must sometimes make difficult decisions to prevent imminent threats and catastrophic events. In such scenarios, the temporary compromise of certain human rights standards can be justified as a necessary means to ensure the greater good and survival of the nation. This debate will explore the balance between upholding human rights and ensuring national security, examining the ethical and legal boundaries of state power in extreme situations. So, we, government, believe that one shall be subjected to torture, treatment, or punishment for the greater interest of state sovereignty and integrity. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is NURHAZIM. I am as a speaker one, and the second speaker is IRWAN. Third speaker is ATIKAH FARIIZAH. Fourth speaker is NURUL. Fifth speaker is Patricia, and the last one is IDEEL bin Ali. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, and fellow debates, today we are here to debate a deeply important issue, which is no one shall be subjected to torture or to inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. This principle is a cornerstone of international human rights and our shared humanity. The proposition argues that government can justify such as action for state sovereignty and integrity. As the opposition, we firmly disagree. First, the prohibition of torture is not just a legal norm, but a moral imperative. Torture inflicts severe and lasting physical and psychological harm, dehumanizing both the victim and the perpetrator. It strips individuals of their dignity and humanity, which no state interest can justify. Second, allowing torture under any pretext sets the dangerous precedent. It blurs the lines of acceptable conduct and undermines the rule of law. History has shown us time and again that when a state permits torture, it leads to widespread abuse of power and erosion of civil liberties. Moreover, the effectiveness of torture is highly questionable. Research and expert testimonies reveal that individuals under extreme duress often provide false information. This makes torture not only morally indefensible but also steadily unsound. In conclusion, while protecting the state sovereignty and integrity is crucial, it cannot come at the cost of our fundamental human values. Torture and inhuman treatment are unethical to justice, humanity, and democracy. We must not let fear erode the foundation of our society.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are discussing a crucial issue that affects the safety and the security of our nation. The motion before us is, this House would allow coercive interrogation technique in the interest of national national security. Firstly, let us define what coercive interrogation techniques are. These are methods that involve the use of physical or psychological pressure to extract information from the individuals who are suspected of having knowledge about potential threats to national security. This can include techniques such as waterboarding, sleep deprivation, and other forms of physical or psychological stress. However, we must consider the context in which these techniques are used. In the face of a ticking bomb scenario, where the lives of innocent civilians are at stake, we must weigh the moral cost of not using these methods against the moral cost of using them. As stated in Why Not Torture Terrorists, Moral, Practical and Legal Aspect of the Ticking Bomb, Justification for Torture by Alan Dershowitz, the simple cost-benefit analysis for employing such non-lethal torture seems overwhelming. It is surely better to inflict non-lethal pain on one guilty terrorist who is illegally withholding information needed to save a whole battalion. This is a stark reminder of the gravity of the situation and the need for us to make difficult choices to protect our nation and its people. Furthermore, the use of coercive interrogation techniques is now not a new concept. In the past, many countries have employed such methods to gather intelligence and prevent attacks. For example, during the Battle of Arges in the late 1950s, the French military used coercive interrogation technique to extract information from Algerian rebels. It is also important to note that the use of coercive interrogation technique is not limited to the military. In the context of national security, this method can be used by law enforcement agencies to prevent and investigate terrorist activities. In conclusion, while the use of coercive interrogation technique may be controversial, we must consider the context in which they are used. In the face of a ticking bomb scenario where the lives of innocent civilians are at stake, we must weigh the moral cost of not using these methods. We must also recognize that the use of coercive interrogation must also recognize the technique that not a new concept and has been employed by many countries in the past to protect their national security and has succeeded. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum, ladies and gentlemen. The notion for this is the House belief the absolute prohibition on torture should be reconsidered in the light of the threat of terrorism. Today, we find ourselves in the critical juncture where the delicate balance between upholding human rights and safeguarding the security of our nation is being tested. The absolute prohibition on torture, while noble in its intent, fails to account for the harsh realities we face in the era of contemporary counterterrorism efforts. In the face of escalating threats posed by radical extremists and their sophisticated networks, we must acknowledge that our conventional methods of gathering intelligence may fall short. These adversaries are driven by an unwavering commitment to cause harm and destabilize our way of life, and they often possess information that would save countless innocent lives. It is in these extraordinary circumstances that we must consider the judicious application of enhanced interrogation techniques, not as a means of inflicting gratuitous cruelty, but as a last resort to extract critical intelligence that would thwart imminent and catastrophic attacks. Let us not be naive in our understanding of the adversaries we confront. These are individuals who have demonstrated a willingness to sacrifice their own lives and those of countless others in pursuit of their twisted ideologies. They possess a level of fanaticism that renders traditional interrogation methods ineffective, leaving us vulnerable to their insidious plots. By maintaining an absolute prohibition on torture, we risk trying our own hands and leaving our citizens defenseless against those who seek to undermine our very existence. It's a harsh reality, but one that we must confront head-on. lest we surrender the moral high ground to those who have no regard for human life or sanctity, to our democratic values. Moreover, we must acknowledge the concept of torture is subjective and open to interpretation. What may be deemed inhuman by some could be considered necessary evil by others in the face of existential threat. It is a delicate balance that requires careful consideration and a willingness to adapt to ever-changing landscape of modern warfare. In the pursuit of justice and the preservation of our way of life, we must be willing to make difficult choices. The absolute prohibition on torture, while well-intentioned, fails to account for the complexities of the world as we inhabit. It is a rigid doctrine that does not allow for the nuances and situational adaptations that are often required in the realm of counter-terrorism. In conclusion, in these trying times, we must be unwavering in our commitment to protecting our people and our way of life. The absolute prohibition on torture, while noble in theory, fails to adequately address the harsh reality we are facing. It is time to embrace a more nuanced, pragmatic approach, one that acknowledges the necessity of enhanced interrogation techniques in exceptional circumstances while maintaining the utmost respect for human rights and rule of law. Thank you for your attention.
Assalamualaikum to the fellow debaters. We as the opposition strongly oppose the statement that no one shall be subjected to torture or inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment from the greater interest of state and integrity. This statement is a dangerous and unethical justification for the use of torture, which is clear violation of human rights and international law. Torture is never acceptable regardless of the circumstances or the perceived interest of the state. It is a crucial and inhuman practice that causes immense physical and psychological suffering to its victims. Torture is also an ineffective means of gathering information or achieving security objectives, as it often leads to false confession or unreliable information. One example of how this statement could be used to justify torture is in the case of a suspected terrorist who is believed to have information about a planned attack. The government might argue that the greater interest of the state requires them to use torture to extract information and prevent the attack. However, this would be a clear violation of the suspected terrorist's human rights and would set a dangerous precedent for the use of torture in other situations. Moreover, the use of torture can have far-reaching consequences for the state itself. It can undermine public trust in the government, damage international relations, and lead to economic sanction or legal consequences. Torture also perpetuates a culture of fear, mistrust, and violence, which can ultimately weaken the state and make it less secure. In conclusion, we firmly believe that torture is never acceptable, regardless of the circumstances or the perceived interest of the state. The government has a moral and legal obligation to uphold human rights and protect its citizens from cruel and inhuman treatment. Thank you.
So, Assalamualaikum everyone. So, as the second speaker from the opposition side for today, I highly disagree with the statement that no one shall be subjected to torture or to inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment from the greater interest of state sovereignty and integrity. Government can justify it. So, it presents a significant ethical and legal dilemma as the opposition. Several compelling arguments can be made against justifying torture or inhuman treatment for the sake of state sovereignty and integrity. The first one, where in the view of violation of fundamental human rights, the prohibition of torture and inhuman or degrading treatment is a core tenet of international human rights law. This is enshrined in multiple treaties, including the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, UDHR, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, ICCPR, and the Convention Against Torture, look at Article 5 of the DHR, for instance, explicitly states, no one shall be subjected to torture or to cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. These protections are non-derogable, meaning they cannot be suspended under any circumstances, even in times of emergency or for reasons of state security. Allowing torture undermines these fundamental principles and erodes the formation of human rights globally. So, secondly, the international courts and legal precedents have consistently rejected the use of torture under any circumstances. The European Court of Human Rights, in cases like Ireland against the United Kingdom, has affirmed that torture and inhuman or degrading treatment are prohibited under the Article 3 of the European Convention on Human Rights. Regardless of the situation, the UN Convention Against Torture, to which many countries are signatories, also explicitly bans torture without exceptions. Lastly, where they are effective, humane alternative to torture for gathering intelligence and maintaining state security. Enhanced interrogation techniques, rapport building strategies, and psychological methods have proven to be effective without violating human rights. Investing in these methods not only upholds human dignity, but also strengthens the legitimacy and moral standing of the state. So, as mentioned before, justifying torture or inhuman and degrading treatment on the grounds of state sovereignty and integrity is fundamentally flawed. It violates international law, ethical principles, and human dignity. Moreover, it is counterproductive and undermines the very security and stability it seeks to protect. Upholding human rights and finding humane, effective alternative is not only a legal obligation, but also a moral imperative for any government committed to justice and the rule of law. So that I highly oppose the statement. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, for the question section, I'm going to ask about in a certain case, like critical situation that force someone to give information, can you give any suggestion to get the information without using torture?
I will answer the question. Resorting to torture is not only unethical but also often ineffective, as it can lead to false information and long-term psychological harm. Here are some effective alternatives to obtain information. First one is rapport building approach. This method involves building a relationship with the person from whom information is needed. It includes expressing concerns, indicating that they are liked, and using humor. A comfortable setting for the integration also makes it more likely that people would disclose the source of information. This approach is 40 times more likely to result in a transfer of information early in the process. The second method is friendly methods that was used like pretending to be friends with the suggest can be an effective way to obtain information. For example, talking about the details, family and offering tea can help in changing their perspective. The third method is control cognitive engagement, CCE. This method is conversational in style and focus on assessing the validity of reported events. It encourages more extensive narrative, thus increasing the allocations to target information. Next is ethical intelligence. This approach requires integrators to work cooperatively with a detail. This may lead to more reliable results compared to coercive methods. These methods are not only more human but also tend to yield more reliable information compared to coercive techniques. It's important to note that any form of physical or psychological torture may lead confessions, but they are usually unreliable. Cooperation is key to obtaining truthful information. However, there is an example where torture have been used in certain cases. One historical example often cited is the case of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, a high-ranking member of Al-Qaeda, who who was subjected to waterboarding among other integration techniques. Following his capture in 2023, it's claimed that he provided information about terrorist plots and networks during these integrations. But the effectiveness reliability of information gained from Muhammad through torture is questionable. He may provide false information simply to end his suffering. So torture is not the best way to use to obtain information because it can lead to false information and long-term psychological harm. That's all from me. So the next question, or
actually, I have one more question for the opposition team. How can the absolute prohibition on torture be justified in the context of contemporary counter-terrorism efforts?
Okay, for the justification for this prohibition is the recognition of the inherent and inalienable dignity and worth of every human being, which should not be violated by the use of cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment, including torture. This is a fundamental principle of human rights law which reflects our common humanity and the conviction that all individuals deserve to be treated with respect and consideration. In the context of contemporary counterterrorism effort, the prohibition on torture is particularly important as terrorist groups and other non-state actors have been known to use torture and other forms of cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment as a means to achieve their objective. The use of torture, even for the state purpose of obtaining information, is not only morally reprehensible but is also a highly ineffective means of acquiring reliable intelligence. Moreover, the use of torture can lead to a cycle of violence and retribution, further exacerbating conflict and instability. In order to maintain the prohibition on torture in the context of contemporary counterterrorism effort, it is essential that all nations and other parties to the conflict abide by their obligation under the international law, including the absolute prohibition on torture. This requires the adoption and implementation of strong mechanism and protocol for preventing and addressing torture and other forms of cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment and punishment. This mechanism and protocol should include independent monitoring, reporting and investigation, as well as accountability and redress for victims and their families. In addition, it is essential to promote compliance with international law through dialogue and cooperation, including through the work of international organizations and non-governmental organizations. This effort should aim to promote transparency, accountability, and the rule of law, while also fostering respect for human rights and international humanitarian law. By doing so, we can uphold the absolute prohibition on torture and other forms of cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment, even in the context of counterterrorism effort.
So I also have a question to the
No,
government.
sorry. But first, when you say we should be friendly on the matters others than torture that you said earlier, you say we need to be friendly, right?
Yeah.
What's the other method, please? The first one. The first
The
method.
first method is rapport building approach.
Rapport building approach.
Yeah.
That's why when we say time-ticking bomb, it means that when terrorists, the terrorist is broad terms. They have many activities, but in some cases they have activities that call bombing. You know, they install the bomb, put a time on it, and the bomb will explode when the time is over. So do you realize what you are doing? You want to be a friendly with a terrorist, with the time ticking, but you don't know where the bomb is installed. But with the civilians, it's around.
That's why.
So you need to be friendly with the terrorists. With maybe there's a few more hours before the bombs explode. So you need to be friendly, and you need to build a report from the terrorists.
Okay.
Is that a reasonable technique to use in a specific situation? I don't say that we should need torture for every punishment or for every crime, but it's a torture for a specific area or specific situation where the terrorist is doing a time-ticking bomb.
Okay, that's why when I answer the question, I give an example like torture have been used in a certain case.
So you agree
Which
that
case?
Certain case like macam you said that bombing have a time, right? So it can use in a crucial.
So that you agree with us, we
So
say that
you agree that we shall use torture for a specific situation to gain the national sovereignty and integrity and to protect the national interest?
No. Sebab
May I add some? By using the torture, it can lead to the unreliable information, and the terrorists can lie to us where the bomb is, and we should use the different methods such as like the persuade the terrorists.
No.
okay?
like I said,
Firstly, you must realize what is terrorism. It is a group that has already committed for their goals to destroy or to build to fight the government. They already committed in their mind that they will leave the family. They going into a group and to fight for their goals. In a persuasion technique, torture is one of the technique.
so if you use torture, is it true? Is it the information that you obtain from the detained is true or no?
The answer is a must needed. Sometimes terrorists will not open their mouth. If you are being friendly, if you are not touching the terrorists that you interrogate,
And one more
will
thing,
the terrorists open their mouth?
Okay, we can use another method such as like psychological method. Some terrorists might being brainwashed by their leaders or by their leaders lah. Okay, by doing the psychological methods such as we say to them what's the real meaning of.
Use psychology method kan dia.
I'm sorry, but even though you said that we can use psychological method, but I agree what Mikael have said just now. We cannot be friends with terrorists because sometimes they are more smarter than us. That's why they know what they're doing.
and
That's
also,
why they use violence because they think violence is the easiest way to get something what they want.
and also there's time ticking bomb, which is if you want to persuade them or use psychologists, it will take time.
Yes, I agree. So, is there anything else the position team wants to add?
Sorry to interrupt. So, as per I mentioned before, in Article 5 of the UDHR, the explicitly states that no one shall be subjected to torture or to cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. These protections are non-derogable, meaning they cannot be suspended under any circumstances, even in times of emergency or for reasons of state security. So, by that, allowing this torture may undermine these fundamental principles and erodes the foundation of human rights globally. So that's my answer.
In the times of emergency, it's still not allowed. That's when we say emergency, the case might be war. The war terrorist is non-state actor and the government is state actor. Between the non-state actor and the state actor still considered a war, and a war is still considered an emergency situation. In an emergency situation, there's a killing. When the government want to protect the civilian, they must know where the group is, the camp of the terrorists. So when you want to know the camp of the terrorists, you need persuasion, you need torture to gain the information from the terrorists. Due to the time ticking bomb now here we call it as the war escalation. means the civilian is under harm and maybe be killed by the terrorists. Terrorism is a very bad group where they already committed for their goals. Again, right? So here the subjected must be, it's not torture is one way of technique to get information. I didn't say that after we capture the terrorists, torture is gonna do right away. Torture is one of the technique. Persuasion is a needed persuasion, and then technique. The next technique will be torture if the terrorist, the person, will not open their mouth to answer the question. The terrorist itself have already violated the Article 5. Article 5 in the UDHR.
But to add one more thing, even though he said that the Article 5 stated that, but Malaysia does not sign in DEGRADING, even though mostly Muslim countries sign the article, the convention.
So you mean that we should not use this DEGRADING? We should not adapt this. So let's think. So I think we should move to the next question from the government side, from the opposition side to the government. Okay. The question to the government side. The question is, what specific criteria or circumstances does the government use to determine when the greater interest of state sovereignty and integrity justifies departing from established human rights principles?
Okay, to answer the question, governments often face complex situations when balancing state sovereignty and integrity with established human rights principles. So there are criteria and sentences that justify such departures typically include national security threats, which if there are credibility and significant threat to national security, governments may argue that measures infringing on human rights are necessary to protect the country. These include threats like terrorism, espionage, and other forms of violation of extremism. When government face credibility and significant threats, they may implement measures that infringe on human rights to protect the country. These measures can include enhanced surveillance, preventive detention, restricted freedoms of movement and assembly, and tightened security protocols. While these actions aim to prevent harm and maintain order, they must be proportionate, necessary, and subject to judicial and legislative oversight. International human rights law allows for such derogations during emergency but imposes strict conditions to ensure that they are not discriminatory and do not erode fundamental freedoms. Examples include the post-9/11 security measures in the US and counter-terrorism policies in the EU, highlighting the ongoing balance between security and civil liberties. And the other one is state of emergency. During declared state of emergency, which can be due to natural disasters, armed conflict, or significant crisis, government might temporarily suspend certain human rights to manage the situation effectively. However, such measures are usually bound by legal frameworks and international agreements that require them to be proportionate, necessary, and limited in duration.
Okay, I have another question.
How does the government ensure that its action purposely in the interest of state sovereignty do not result in the violation of fundamental human rights and international legal obligations?
May allow me to answer the question. Governments balance state sovereignty with the protection of human rights and adherence to international obligations through constitutional and legal frameworks, ensuring laws comply with human rights standards, and through an independent judiciary that reviews governmental action. So they ratify international treaties, establish national human rights institutions, and encourage
civil society and media oversight to hold authorities accountable. And additionally, international monitoring, reporting mechanisms and potential sanctions from the global community alongside public participation and transparency help maintain this balance. So education and training for officials further ensure compliance with human rights obligations. Did I answer the question?
Okay, so in some situation like war, the government will lock up the criminal, a lot of criminal in one cell or room in jail. So, for example, the room or the cell is enough only for 10 people, but they are put like maybe 30 or 40 criminal in one room. So that is called torture. So what is the opposition opinion about this?
Okay, following Article 5 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights (UDHR), which prohibits torture and inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment, does not imply that criminals should not be imprisoned, even if prisons are overcrowded. Instead, it underscores the need to address the issue of prison overcrowding in ways that respect human rights. Here are several counterpoints and suggestions for addressing this concern. Okay, first one is maintaining human dignity in imprisonment. Okay, Article 5 focus on preventing torture and inhuman treatment, which applies to the condition of imprisonment as well. Overcrowded prison can indeed lead to inhuman or degrading condition, but this not mean that dangerous criminals should be left unpunished or released. Instead, it highlights the need for prison reform to ensure that incarceration conditions meet human rights standards. Okay, second one is prison reform and infrastructure investment. Government should invest in building and maintaining adequate prison infrastructure to prevent overcrowding. Okay, this involves first, constructing the prison facilities. Second, expanding existing one. And last one is ensuring that prisons are properly funded and staffed to maintain human condition.
Okay. So, as you said earlier that the government can provide facilities for the criminal. Okay, what do you think about our citizens, like citizens that are poor, live in a urban area? So what can we do for them if you more thinking or focus on the criminal facilities more than the citizens, our citizens in the urban area?
Yeah, instead of taking care of the prisoners, better we take care
Of
our citizens.
Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah.
You are saying about one of my friends suggested we have to increase the amount of the prisons, right? And you say that how about the needy people? How about the poor people? So for your information, we are focusing on the human rights issue, the human rights violations. We are not talking about the economic development here. Because if you want to talk about the economic development, then you have to refer to another subject. So in my opinion, he is partially correct in this term. It's because, because when it's a punishment, when it's called punishment, it doesn't mean that we have to make them comfortable. But at least we give the ability to survive, to live normally. Because when punishment, right? Punishment. When we put them in prison, it's punishment. Of course, they will not live comfortably, right? Yes. So I agree with him. We have to increase the amount of prisons, put them in other prisons, so that they can live properly, even without being in comfortable zone.
Okay, so the question from government side is not valid.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, my bad.
Sorry for our question.
Sorry.
I have a question for the government side. As we know that terrorist groups are mostly come from the religious extremists and the cult. So some of the believers might have been brainwashed by their parents or leaders since they were little. These people, they were isolated from the outside world and they cannot make their own decision. They also didn't know which is right or wrong. So my question to the government, should these people also be tortured to get the information?
No, I don't say that they need to be automatically tortured. No. It's not like that. They don't need to be automatically tortured. Because torture should be the last resort when there is no other available humane methods of getting information from them. After all, they might be lying. They might be telling us lies, or on the other hand, they might be pretending, not knowing anything. After all, most terrorists are actually pretty good at this.
Smart.
They're smart. Usually they score high scores in IQ tests.
So you said that you don't agree to use torture to gain the great interest for the state? No.
So apparently they say that torture should be the last resort in terms of punishment, right? So that means you also agree with us, especially because you respect the decision of not having the torture method as the priority, because it should be the last resort, right? And in terms that you say that some criminal or they are good at lying, right?
Yes.
So I think this is not, they have a solutions even if they lie. For example, in case of interrogation, some the spy or intelligence agencies, they have some machine to detect the lies, even it's not always correct. But it can be helpful to find if they are lying or not. So how do you think about it?
That's why I say in the first place, torture is a must in a certain situation, like a time-ticking bomb.
But we are talking about terrorists here.
Time-ticking bomb is a doing of terrorists. That's why I say torture is one of the techniques needed in the persuasion of gaining information from the perpetrator.
I don't call it persuasion, because if you torture the people, you are actually putting them under the force and compel. You are compelling them to say whatever you like to.
That's why after the persuasion,
this is not a
after the
persuasive
persuasion
method
of the friendly technique and report technique, and you said earlier, then come the torture. In the life-threatening situation, people will say the correct, will not lie, to save their life.
So
when you said earlier, in some of the cases that lie detector has failed to detect they do lies.
I was just giving the examples on how to detect if they are lying or not. It doesn't mean that I'm fully believing in the machine or in the tool. In this case, the lie detector. But this is one of the ways that we have. So if we want to detect they are lying or not, there can be some psychological method or whatever method is. But it's not only inclusive in the torture or torment. That is the thing that I want to stress here, which is that the torture is not the only method to find or to convict them for the crimes which they are accused of.
You must realize that torture are not a certain level where we do the life-threatening torture.
Okay? Yeah, it doesn't matter. For example,
yes,
I don't actually differentiate what kind of level, what type of stage of the torture. For example, there were some cases in Guantanamo Bay when the American forces they keep playing the radio in the prison. This is not life-threatening, but in turn, some of the prisoners, as a result of their, low limit, the minimum level of the torture, they become insane.
Guantanamo Bay is not to keep their security, because Guantanamo Bay itself does not place in US.
So it doesn't matter which place the prison is played. What matters here is all countries need to respect the international law.
Inside of the nation itself.
The international law is binding. You know that when it's binding because it's a part of the customary international law.
We don't have the international police. When US itself doesn't getting caught by the international law, there's no international police to caught US where they have the veto power in the United Nations.
It's another case. They have veto
no,
power.
United Nations, 5 countries that have the veto power, the US sometimes do the torture.
Yeah, I know that.
The 5 countries that have the veto power that say that the law of the human right is binding.
You are actually talking about the enforcement power.
When US,
the US is supposed to respect the international law, no matter what country is that. Whether the US or the Israel, etc., all are obliged to comply with the international law.
Yes, I agree with you. Yes,
because the US, they fight for the moral value and liberal democratic norms.
No, US already veto 3 motions that be to protect the Palestinians.
It's not about they are wanting or not. The issue here is
the
international law must be respected.
Israel has already tortured the Palestinians, even though they're doing blockade at the Gaza. They're doing the blockade at the Gaza from the Ihrl crossing until the Rafah crossing. They put a wall and they do the barricade to prevent from the Palestinians going outside, and they already blocked the humanitarian aid. Despite that, Israel has already bombing and killing the people inside of the blockade. That means they torture. They are occupying power. They already violate the prohibition to protect the occupied person.
So does it mean that you condone what?
I will include the debate today. So I stand with the government motion. This House would allow coercive interrogation technique in the interest of national security. Stand on critical grounds for our nation protection and stability. The first one is about the national security. It's most important to secure our security from the attack from the other terrorists, like my friend says about the ticking bomb, and it's our job as a government to secure our citizens from the other attacks and other threats from the terrorists or others that can destroy our country.
The torture to the criminal like this terrorist is important to our intelligence to avoid this attack and threats from the others. So our country is safe from the attack. And secondly is the torture must be controlled and regulated use. It's essential to emphasize that allowing coercive interrogation technique does not equate to unchecked or widespread use. Strict regulatory frameworks, rigorous oversight mechanism, and clear guidelines will govern the application of this method, and this ensure that their use is limited to exceptional circumstances, preventing, abuse, and protecting fundamental human rights. The torture is not just for to injure the criminal, but to get our information. If we get information, we stop the torture and not give over torture. So the next is effectiveness in emergency. Like the time ticking bomb, we need the information in the quick time. So the torture is effective in emergency time. If we don't avoid this, we don't do the torture, we can get the information in quick time. So our country will destroy. So I hope the members of the parliament is supporting this motion to be Allah Akbar. Sama berkat. In light of this point, we ask this estimate house to support this motion by permitting this control use of coercive interrogation techniques in the interest of national security. We equip our security agency with the necessary tool to protect our nation effectively. To ensure that while our primary duty is the protection of our citizens, we remain committed to upholding human rights and the rule of law. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let me conclude for our group.
Ladies and gentlemen, as we reach the conclusion of the debate, it's crucial to revisit and value at the core of our argument, which is the use of torture under any circumstance is illegal by all means under the international law. It strips individuals of their dignity, causing irreparable physical and mental damage. Our commitment to human rights must be unwavering and non-negotiable. The proponents argue that state sovereignty and national security can justify the use of torture. However, this perspective is fundamentally flawed. This effectiveness of torture in extracting reliable information is highly questionable. Numerous studies and historical evidence have shown that some of the prisoners have provided with false information in order to stop the torture or the violation of human rights. Moreover, the use of torture undermines the moral and ethical values that define civilized society. We must also consider the long-term consequences. The normalization of torture breeds a culture of fear and mistrust both domestically and internationally. It alienates allies, fuels extremist propaganda, and ultimately compromises the very security it seeks to protect. In conclusion, the sanctity of human rights must never be compromised. Torture is an abhorrent practice that has no place in any society that values justice, dignity, and rule of law. Our resolve should be to protect these principles, ensuring a safer and more just world for all of our people. Thank you. That's all.